Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Jeongmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now Thursday, February 27th. It is a little bit after 5 p.m. And this week has been a really big week for the Constitutional Courts. We just saw the president offer his final defense for more than an hour. And we also saw the latest ruling from the Constitutional Court about the acting president's truncated appointments of the Constitutional Court justices. Now, Jeongmin, you paid a lot of attention on Yoon's defense. Could you walk us through it? Let's not walk through every single detail. I don't think we have the time for that.
Do you have an hour? Or more, because the speech was an hour. Well, there were 10 hearings and then a final defense hearing on Tuesday, February 25th. And it was basically a wrap-up sort of session from both sides. And then Yoon was given unlimited time to make his case, defending his decision to declare the martial law on December 3rd. And he used that for a 67 minutes, 77 pages of a speech on multiple things. Some are basically just reiterating his previous points, such as how the opposition's 입법 독재, the legislative dictatorship, as he put it, was one of the reasons why he thought it was a national crisis situation that justified a martial law. But there were interesting new and very bold claims and arguments that he included this time around as well. I have just filed a very detailed analysis about specific quotes, so I won't go into all the details. Read it on koreapro.org, but just some of the main points. One of the controversies that sort of dominated the past 10 hearings was whether or not the intention of the martial law was for something related to insurrection, basically military use to paralyze the parliament. He dedicated significant amount of time to prove himself against it, stating that the way that he used the martial law is not for upsetting the constitutional order, but to restore it in order to use it as a communication tool, basically. His point is, the martial law that I declared on December 3rd, he says, was to borrow the format of a martial law to let the citizens know about this crisis situation that I saw as a president, not everything that he could share to the public, basically.
I'm guessing that's why soldiers were breaking into windows then.
Well, exactly. That might be the president's, rationale or justification. But if you want to communicate with someone, pointing guns at the other fellow is not really going to be very conducive for talking.
And that's why there are national addresses and, going to the National Assembly for the presidential speeches and the press conferences and so on and so forth. But he did sort of try to build his case where he thought other means were all already exhausted. So he was only left with something that involves the military. And by the way, he did directly admit in his final defense that it was him that instructed the military to go to the National Election Commission because he wanted to check the computer system. Many of these passages, many of the statements that he makes, some are meant directly as a legal defense, it seems, for certain to persuade the justices that it was based on his perception of national security threat that was imminent enough that justified it. But some of those were actually more primarily for the public sentiment rather than just the legal significance, it seems. So, and that includes the part where he concluded the speech. He made these pledges, sort of like presidential pledge 2.0. If I'm restored, I'm going to do ABC sort of speech. And
including revising the Constitution.
Revising the Constitution so that he was implying that the presidential term could be shorter and that the prime minister will get more authority when it comes to domestic issues, and the president will be taking care of more foreign relations and security related matters. And then he mentions, I love the younger generation in South Korea. I hope the best for them. So I will make sure that there are lower political barriers for the younger generation to enter politics, was what he was basically saying.
Well, even if there is a chance that the Constitutional Court reinstates Yoon to the presidency, Yeah, if he thinks that he's going to have any sort of authority or political capital to do something as significant as reforming the constitution, the man is clearly quite high.
Within his term, right? The majority is DP until the end of his term, even if he's restored. There are, just very quickly, there were two very bold claims that he made. One is Itaewon disaster. He said that the Itaewon crowd crush, he directly said North Korean spies instructed the opposition and anti-state forces in South Korea to conduct anti-state protests after the Itaewon disaster.
It's not substantiated, no.
Well, there were some, remember, there were some intelligence a year ago or so about something related to that.
I think, yeah.
But then using that in his final defense, I'm not sure how much this will be conducive from the justice's point of view. And the second very big claim also was about Chinese espionage as well. He included all of these, not only North Korea, but China very directly into the claims of his perceived national security threat to make his case. But then let's say that he is restored and Beijing has to see Yoon as a counterpart again. Wouldn't this be a problem?
Well, that's the thing. The Chinese ambassador to South Korea, Bai Ding, he made at least two public statements about how Beijing is concerned about these anti-Chinese rhetoric that is coming out of South Korea. Now, of course, he didn't name names, but it's clearly a reference to what the president has been saying, along with a lot of noise about this from the conservative media and from conservative protesters themselves. So the question about this sort of statement, now when a diplomat makes this kind of very pointed statement, there's usually a very good reason for it. And so the question is this a warning from Beijing? Or is this just some sort of diplomatic posturing?
I think it's a warning because while we're at this, we can just touch on this topic. There were very concerning cases recently when it comes to protest in Anguk Station area where the Constitutional Court is located. There was this one case where a man in his 40s dressed up as Captain America, a full body suit with the shield, trying to basically go into the Chinese embassy. And there has been a lot of anti-China sentiment, not just the sentiment, but actual slogans utilized at the protests.
I think more hostility towards China.
Right, but then really not that much substantiated or triggered by a certain incident. It's more like an overarching theme that these protesters have sort of latched onto recently.
Now, of course, we have to remember that the anti-Chinese sentiment in South Korea is not new at all.
It's not new. It's been rising, but then the use of these as active slogans and active talking points in Yoon's final defense, I think this is definitely an escalation from at least Beijing's point of view. And I think the reason why I think this is a warning is because from People Power Party perspective, they might be very awkward actually looking at this because they are not exactly a pro-China sort of party, but then also they would probably feel the responsibility to say something about the recent rise of sentiment against China and the use in quite violent protests as well.
And geopolitically, this is a bit of a awkward timing as well. We're going to have the APEC summit soon, and they're trying to get Xi Jinping to come to South Korea.
Gyeongju.
Right, exactly. And there's also a trade war going on, not just between the US and China, but between South Korea and China as well.
Just the whole world is
exactly.
sort of...
And so right at this point, when South Korea really needs to try to improve trade with China and all of this anti-Chinese rhetoric coming out, it's quite understandable why the Chinese ambassador would make such a statement.
Right. Let's touch on the last one among domestic politics related issue. Han Dong-hoon is back.
Yes, so he has a book published now, his sort of memoir, which covers the period from martial law all the way to his resignation as a People Power Party leader in December last year.
He was never a popular leader.
He was never a popular leader.
I mean, he was quite popular during the general election for that time, for a while.
And also he won the August inter-party election for the party leadership with quite a few points ahead of his peers. So, there was still some popularity at the start, but that popularity waned very very, very quickly as he sided with elements of his party that were against the president.
Also, he was wishy-washy throughout the whole year, right?
He was wishy-washy, especially during martial law.
And before that as well, like, is he bros with Yoon or not bros with Yoon? It was very unclear for the entire year.
And the way that, his book just came out yesterday, and there were crowds of Han Dong-hoon supporters who are outside the Kyobo right here, right in front of our office. And
the Hoonie again slogans.
Yes, yeah, and they established tents right outside the Kyobo building as well in support of Han Dong-hoon. It sold out. I went actually yesterday to buy the book just to read over it for any coverage, but it was sold out yesterday, so I just bought it today, and I had a little glimpse into it. The book is structured as a sort of testimony of Han.
Quite clever because he did not go as a witness to the Constitutional Court hearing, but after the hearing is done and the justices are deliberating, he sort of publishes like this 100 pages of testimony.
Yeah, and it's quite a substantiated testimony as well. There are a lot of not shocking revelations, but still revelations based on what Han Dong-hoon experienced as party leader and being at the echelons of South Korean politics at the time of turmoil. And what we can see is that Han Dong-hoon has distanced himself very clearly away from the party the elements within his previous party that side with Yoon as of now. He publicly criticized the elements of his party that sided with the president's martial law, bringing in the Baekguldan, the White Skulls, into the
that feels like ages ago, but that
National
happened.
Assembly conference room as like the extremes of the party suddenly emerging as the anti-impeachment goes on. So I think that Han Dong-hoon's book, there's still a lot of revelations that are intended to come out as I go flick through the pages. But we'll see some coverage on that next week.
Now, Han Dong-hoon clearly still has presidential ambitions.
He does.
But the question is, does he really have a chance this time around? Because we have to really think about this. Because, yes, Han Dong-hoon is now in a more favorable position because of what's going on with the Myung-tae-gun, the power broker scandal.
Which is, just walk us through it just very quickly.
Well, there have been revelations about how this power broker had helped the Daegu mayor as well as a Seoul mayor to get elected into their offices. And these are some of the leading candidates within the PPP. But with all of these people implicated with this power broker, yes, Han Dong-hoon might be in a somewhat better position than he was just, 2 weeks ago. But that being said, a significant number of the people power base are really anti-impeachment. And Han Dong-hoon is very much pro-impeachment. Does he have any support base to cling on to besides his rabid fan base who just came to buy all of his books?
I think he does.
There's no absolutes in politics, but he does have political capital in making sure that he paints himself as the kind of moral leader within martial law, going against martial law, going for impeachment, siding with the elements of his party that he deemed moderate.
Right, and also he is aligned with so-called under 73 group within the People Power Party, the younger lawmakers.
73 is in 1973.
Yes, not young as in under 73 years old, but
those born in 1973 and after.
Yes. But more importantly, People Power Party right now, sure, Oh Se-hoon and Hong Jun-pyo, they are leading in polls, and of course Kim Moon-soo is there as well, though he says he's maybe not gonna run, although he went back and forth a little bit this week about that.
He was a bit coy.
Right, and when there are these lack of clarity when it comes to an actual front runner is, what the party usually does is wait for a certain figure to be charismatic and go viral among the supporters, enough to get the moderate voters back to the base.
Sorry for interrupting, but just because of the elections that we've seen over the past couple of years, it's always been individual politics where the cult of the individual has been emphasized very clearly within People Power Party election campaigns that we saw in April. DP as well, we saw that with Lee Jae-myung. So I think that there's always a chance for Han Dong-hoon to come back to the presidential echelon.
Speaking of presidential hopefuls, we have to also mention Lee Jae-myung. He, could you walk us through exactly what the whole trial was like?
The Lee Jae-myung trial, it's quite complicated, right? Because there are multiple cases and multiple trials.
But this specific one was about election law violations.
The one that he was ruled guilty, sentenced to...
a year, but 2 year suspension.
Right, that was the lowest court, and then the high court, the second one, the appeal one, the ruling will come out March 26th, I believe, which puts the deadline for the Supreme Court ruling potentially June 26th.
Which is way after Yoon's impeachment hearing and after a potential presidential election.
But then there are some lawyers who tend to say that if the Supreme Court really, really wanted it to, be done quickly, it could be as early as April. I don't think that's possible because the Supreme Court requires very long and extended procedural stuff to do as well, like just appointing who will actually take care of the case. That alone takes a month. And even with the high court, the rule is that norm or rule is that it has to be done within 3 months, which was not possible as well.
And so we have to take this kind of possibility into extension. Yes, Lee Jae-myung has legal troubles. Yes, regardless of what the verdict will be, someone is going to appeal, and that's going to go all the way up to the Supreme Court, and that's going to take months. But we are looking at a potential May presidential election. So the Constitution is quite clear as to what a president can be charged with. Treason being one of them, as we saw with Yoon. But election law violations, I don't think that the president has carte blanche on that. He has presidential immunity.
Right, but then it's an unprecedented situation where a criminal case is already ongoing on a case that he is already ruled guilty in the first court. So it's under debate, very fierce debate between lawyers right now, legal experts right now, I think, whether or not the criminal court case will stop or not. My hunch is that it will probably stop, but there is no precedent about it.
But legalese aside, it also comes down to public opinion, doesn't it? The public is not stupid. They know exactly what's going on. And Lee Jae-myung himself, he made this very snide remark that he has nothing to worry about yesterday.
Right.
And everyone knew what he meant by that. He meant that, I'm going to be president, so I don't have to worry about any of these rulings anymore.
When it comes to timing. So him sort of treating this election violation law case just as sort of like a game that he plays and trying to figure out which timing would be the best. It's not exactly the best look for a potential political leader, but so this could potentially become a scenario where the general public, after, let's say that he is elected as a president, and then the court case stops, there would be a big sector of the society where people just don't trust him as a leader.
Precisely.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Week ahead. This week, there has been very big economic indicators coming out and decisions from the central bank, such as the interest rate cut that you wrote about, John. Are there any follow-ups that we are expecting in coming weeks or something that we have to keep an eye on?
At least as far as interest rates cuts go, this is probably going to be the last one that we're going to see for a very long time. So we don't have to keep an eye on that anymore. But what we really do have to keep an eye on is the ongoing tariff threats that are just continuing to come out of the U.S. Donald Trump just recently said that now he's going to expand the tariffs to include copper and not just aluminum and steel. And this is not yet even counting the tariffs that he plans to impose on semiconductors and on electric vehicle batteries. And we also have to keep in mind that semiconductors is a huge part of South Korea's exports, which South Korea is already being pushed out of the market by their Chinese competitors. And so it's just one giant mess that South Korean companies and the government have to deal with.
Something very pleasant to look forward to in coming weeks. And Joon Ha, in the week ahead, we have to keep an eye on the acting president's decision on the Constitutional Court's decision about Ma Hun-young, the ninth justice candidate. Can you just very briefly walk us through what happened?
Yeah, so the Constitutional Court, they ruled finally on the legal legitimacy of...
The constitutionality.
Yeah, the constitutionality of, of refusing to appoint the final ninth justice, Mao Eun-hyuk, and they ruled that it was unconstitutional for the acting president to go ahead with the appointment of Mao Eun-hyuk. Of course, the acting president does not have a legal timeline to respond to this.
Or there's no mandate for that either.
Yeah, but the president will be inclined to follow the constitutional ruling. Whether he makes that decision immediately, it's not certain. His office did say that he would look through all the legalities before going ahead with it and speak to his cabinet, but we should see a decision sometime next week.
Right, but then maybe this is a moot point because even if Ma is appointed, all the hearings have already closed. So per precedent at the Constitutional Court, Ma might not even be able to join the ruling process, right? And if they do decide to include him, they might need to actually do the final defense hearing again.
Which they will not.
Right, so let's keep an eye on this next week.
And all of this information will be sent to your email inboxes by Monday at 2 p.m. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
And I'm John Lane. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.